Our government is a constitutional democracy or constitutional republic. And I think we understand that. While the people elect their leaders, and the leaders, their responsibility is to represent the people and their interests, to keep the leaders from becoming power hungry and trying to rule over the people. They are limited by the Constitution. So there are limits on the power of government. Remember we talked about democracy? Democracy was kind of a scary, dirty word to the founders, because even though it literally means the rule of the people, they were afraid of it being a mob rule. So we want to understand when we talk with people that America is a constitutional republic. Y'all know what movie this is from?
The Princess Bride?
Yes, very good. So Thomas Jefferson was the author of the Declaration of Independence, and he was highly influenced by John Locke. And John Locke believed in the idea of a social contract. That is, that people enter into a agreement with their government where the government's duty is protected, or the government's duty is to protect the natural rights of the people. The government is not meant to become a power-hungry group of individuals who control everything. Remember, that was an oligarchy. A constitutional republic or constitutional democracy would be where the people enter into an agreement. They give their consent to be governed by those who they choose. So this social contract theory that John Locke espoused was very, very influential on Jefferson. Be familiar with John Locke and his idea of a social contract. Another man who was influential in our founding fathers' ideas, Thomas Hobbes. And he wanted to put together a science of politics. Oh, is there a question? Sorry.
It was our announcement.
Oh, okay. He wanted there to be a science of politics that was based on an indisputable principle. The indisputable principle is that people, in our human nature, the strongest element is not reason, but passion. Just take a look at some of the videos you can find on YouTube about people getting triggered, people responding in anger and emotion. Our first tendency is to respond to things with passion and not reason. And then out of the passions, the strongest passion is the fear of a violent death. And so that fear gives rise to the natural right of self-preservation. And so Hobbes wanted to form a government that would basically protect this natural right that people have of self-preservation, protecting themselves. So he was influential on the founders, and we can see some of his his thoughts coming through among our rights being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So life, self-preservation. And going back to Locke, Locke was the one who believed that liberty was very, very important, and we've got to protect that liberty. That's what the government should do. And anybody is free to believe and do as they choose, as long as they don't harm or infringe upon somebody else's rights. So there's some more on the social contract theory. This will all be on the course homepage today. So this influenced Jefferson, who then wrote the Declaration of Independence. Here are the major themes. All men are equal. All people have natural rights that come to us from our Creator. The purpose of government is to secure or protect and guarantee those rights. Measure of justice is the people who are governed give their consent. Whenever a government starts to infringe upon the rights of the people and try to control them, the people have a right to revolution. Now, there was also a stipulation in the Declaration that because you don't want the people to become an anarchy, just doing whatever they please. So if there was a revolution, there needs to be some kind of a constraint or limit on it. And so prudence. And what Jefferson meant by that was if a people are going to overthrow a government, they need to do it for a legitimate reason. They can't do it just for any whim. There needs to be a legitimate reason that would line up with these other principles. All right, any questions on the Declaration of Independence? How many of you have actually read that in your life, or maybe in a previous class you read it together? And how many of you? Okay, a few of you. So I would encourage you with the Constitution assignment. The Declaration is much shorter. You might read it too, and just kind of be one of the few American citizens who've actually read it. Now, when was it written? When do we celebrate that? 4th of July, what year?
1776.
All right. True or false? This was our first written government. False. Very good. It was simply our declaration, our announcement to the world. We are separating ourselves from England. What was the first written government?
Emancipation Proclamation?
Say that again?
The Emancipation Proclamation?
No, that was in Lincoln's time.
Oh, wait, no.
Our first written government, our first written government document.
Articles of Confederation?
Right, the Articles of Confederation, not the Constitution. The Constitution is our second government document, and it's the one that we still have today. But for 6 years, we had another government called the Articles of Confederation. And our founders actually began to work on these articles in 1776. After we had had the battles of Lexington and Concord to begin the Revolutionary War, after the Declaration of Independence, we had leaders in our country from the different states start working on a written government. So what the situation was, we have separated ourselves from England. Now we need to have a government that is set up to help us as American colonists have a common governing document. So the Articles of Confederation were written during the 1776 through 1779. They were finally ratified by all the states in 1781, and then they were put into place. Now, you'll need to know about the Articles, but here's a summary of them. They set up a very weak national government. In other words, more power resided in the states than in the federal government. But that was on purpose, because the colonists did not want an overbearing, strong national government. So they deliberately made it weak. They did not have a president. They did not have a Supreme Court. The only thing they had was a Congress, a legislative branch. Now, today our Congress is made up of two bodies, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Articles of Confederation simply had 13 members, one from each of the states. So if you look right here at this little graphic here, what that meant was Rhode Island, the smallest state, had one person, just like Virginia, one of the largest states. I'm going to make this a little bigger. So the Articles really just was a legislative branch represented equally by all 13 states. They could not tax. They could not regulate commerce or trade. So this national government that existed for 6 years could not tell, for example, they could not tell Virginia, you will no longer sell your tobacco to Spain. They could not do that as a national government. And then there was no common currency. There was no paper money or coin money that was produced by the federal government. So each state had their own currency, basically. So any questions on the Articles of Confederation?
No, sir.
One of the, a couple of things that happened that caused our founders to meet for a constitutional convention and eventually rewrite a new constitution was, since they could not tax and the states just promised to give money, well, you can guess what happened. The states really didn't pay a lot of taxes. For example, your textbook points out that there was a period where Congress asked for $12 million, but they only received $3 million from the states. And so something happened in 1786. There was some farmers in Virginia who had fought in the Revolutionary War, and they were promised a pension from the government. They were also promised that if they ever got in debt and they could not pay off their debt, that the government would not seize their land. Well, in Virginia, some farmers, and this is on page 32 of your book, it's called Shays' Rebellion. And excuse me, it's in Massachusetts, not Virginia. But about 2,000 farmers who were not getting their government pensions, and they were threatened with foreclosure on their lands. They revolted, and this is what's called Shays' Rebellion, led by a farmer named Daniel Shay, who had been a captain in the Revolutionary War. Because they were faced with the possibility of losing their land and not being able to make a living, and not being paid their pensions, they felt like they were being they felt like the wealthy leaders were taking advantage of them, and they didn't like that, of course. And there was worry that the new government might eventually draw distinctions between the elite and the wealthy, and then the poor. This is what they wanted to avoid because of this being what was happening and how it was in England. So this rebellion was one of the catalysts for the calling of a constitutional convention. The Articles of Confederation were not working. So here's a little thing that summarizes it. No president, no executive agencies, no judiciary, no tax base, no army funding, no navy funding, weak foreign policy, no trade policy. What were we thinking? And the poor article was saying it wasn't all that bad. But anyway, the first Constitutional Convention gathered in May of 1787. The purpose was to fix the present government, the present Constitution, which was the Articles of Confederation. The purpose was not initially, and that's in the minds of most of the founders, was not to completely scrap the Articles and start over. But there was one man who really wanted to see the Articles scrapped and a new constitution written that was much stronger on the federal level. And that man is James Madison of Virginia. You need to know James Madison. You need to know that Thomas Jefferson was the author of the Declaration of Independence, or he was the primary author. You need to know that James Madison, his fellow Virginian, was the primary writer of the Constitution. He is called the father of the Constitution. He kept very detailed records about the Constitutional Convention. And he was a strong advocate, along with others, a few others, to put together a government in which there was a strong federal government. Now, this caused much debate in the Constitutional Convention. Madison would have been known as a Federalist, and then all those opposed to a strong central federal government are anti-federalists. They were very concerned that state rights would be destroyed by the Constitution. The Constitution would come to resemble more of a monarchy than a democracy. And the system that we have with the Electoral College, they said that did not let the people select the president. So, if you all will, let's take a 5-minute break, and I will be right back. I apologize, but let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll pick back up for the last 10 minutes in 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Chill. How's Washington? Here to Michigan. No.
Everybody still here?
Yes, sir. You have that, Andy.
I apologize. I have some problems.
No worries, sir. We all do.
After heart surgery, sometimes I have fluid build up around my lungs, in my heart, and whenever that happens, you got to take a Lasix, and today was one of those days, so it'll hit you and you got to go. I know that's TMI, but I just want to keep it real with you. Keep it real.
Perfectly acceptable.
Do what?
Perfectly acceptable, Captain.
Yeah. Got a couple still gone, or is everybody here?
Haley went to the bathroom. There's one in person.
Okay. Now, you won't need to know about Shays' Rebellion or anything like that. One more person, right? Everybody ready for some cooler weather? Is that everybody? Did you say that that was everybody?
We're waiting on one more.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is a public announcement for anybody who finds this video in 2,000 years from now. The reason we had this big pause in this video was we took a bathroom break. Always got to be thinking ahead. Okay, well, we're going to get going because it's been 5 minutes. From pages 33 through 33 through 40, there are three things that you need to know about the Constitutional Convention that the debates kind of centered around. First of all, there was what is known as the Great Compromise. So you've got one group of founders saying a stronger federal government that basically there will still be state rights, but the federal government will be the final or ultimate governing authority. The anti-federalists are like, no, we don't want something that's going to be just like England again. We want states to be more powerful than a union. And so during the debates, there were two plans proposed. The Virginia plan was proposed by Edmund Randolph of Virginia, and he proposed that there be an executive branch, a president who would have general authority. Then there would be a Supreme Court with other courts underneath it. And then the legislature would be bicameral, which simply means two houses. Bi, put a slash right there, and bi means two. and then cameral would be two bodies or two houses. And so instead of there just being one Congress with one person from each state, there would be two houses, and each state would have however many representatives based on their population. So that's the Virginia plan. Then a man by the name of William Patterson proposed the New Jersey plan. He wanted to keep the Congress just like it was from the Articles, but let's add an executive branch, but instead of there just being one person, because it looks too much like a king, let's have a plural executive that would be chosen by Congress, these guys up here. And then whoever the leaders, plural, of the executive branch are, they can then appoint federal officials. And then also he said we have a judicial branch, but just one single Supreme Court. So here's what you need to know: the Great Compromise, proposed by Roger Sherman of Connecticut. And the compromise said, okay, let's have a bicameral legislature or Congress with two houses, but one house will be based on a state's population, and then the upper house will be equally represented from each state. So that's how it is today. Each state has two U.S. senators. That's the upper house, the Senate. The lower house, the House of Representatives, I believe there's 500 and no, let me back up. Somewhere between 420 and I think 430 representatives right now. And you have states like Texas and California and New York that have over 20 representatives. Oklahoma, we only have, we used to have 6, but I think we just have 5 now. So that's based on how many people live in our state. And then the Great Compromise said these 3 branches will be separate but also equal. You see, in the New Jersey plan, Congress had more power. And that's the same way it would have been in the Virginia plan, because the executive would only have a general authority. So Sherman's plan said 3 separate branches, but they're equal in their powers. So here is a graph of our government structure under the Constitution. There it is right there, 435 representatives right now. So let's look at the differences here between the Articles and the Constitution. Concerning federalism, that is a nation state. Under the Articles, the 13 states simply were a league of friendship, a league, a confederation. Under the Constitution, we say a more perfect union where nation and states share power. Concerning the states being representatives, everybody was equal. Here you have the compromise. It's proportional in the House to the state's population. It's equal in the Senate. Taxation, states only under the Articles, state and federal under the Constitution. The powers of Congress, under the Articles, foreign relations, Army and Navy, declare war, ambassadors, treaties. The Constitution gives the power to Congress to these things, but also taxation, control interstate commerce, a national currency, and to put down rebellions. Remember, they still have Shays' Rebellion fresh on their mind. Then if they wanted to amend something, the Articles said you had to have unanimous approval, all 13 states. The Constitution, 2/3 of both houses of Congress and 3/4 of the states. What the Constitution does, any questions on that real quick?
Yes, sir.
You've probably heard the phrase checks and balances. This will be on the slides. You can check it out. But you can see here the executive branch is the president. He carries out the laws. Congress makes the laws, the legislative branch. And then the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, interprets the laws. So, a lot of times you'll hear presidential candidates talk about, when I'm president, I'm going to overturn this law, or I'm going to put into law. And really, a president can't do that. He can propose laws, but it's up to the Congress to either make the law or reject it. Now, if Congress makes a law, the president can veto it, but then Congress can veto, or they can override the president's veto. So take a look at the checks and balances, checks that the president has on the legislature and the checks that he has on the judicial. And next Friday, we'll have a little bit of lecture about the Bill of Rights before we take the quiz. So any questions on from the Declaration to the Articles to the Constitution?
Not at the moment, sir.
All right. We'll see you Friday. Those of you that I need to talk to about the quiz. Very quickly, let me just remind you, you need to know the 4 things in Chapter 1, the 4 foundational beliefs, or 4 core values.
So the quiz is this Friday and the exam is next Friday.
Yes.
Or next Friday.
Next Friday through Sunday.
So does the quiz close this Friday? Or does it open this Friday?
Say that again.
Does the quiz close this Friday? Or does it open on Friday?
The quiz will be during class time.
Okay.
So we'll start off after we take roll. We'll have a little bit about the Bill of Rights, do a little review, and then the quiz, I'll open it on your course homepage. Will everybody have a laptop to take it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, and I'll give you a time limit, and both, go ahead.
How long is our time limit gonna be?
We'll try to give you a good 30 minutes, but it's not going to be very long, and it's open book. So know those 4 core values in chapter 1. Know the know kind of the double-edged side of democracy, that it gives people an opportunity, but then people have to be responsible. That's on page 2 and 3. Know that our government is 3 things: a democratic system, a constitutional system, and a free market system. And some of these, like those 3 things, will probably give a short answer. Like, what does it mean to be a free market system? And so you'll want to talk about a free market system is where businesses and individuals are free. And it's, you might compare it to a communist country or a socialist country. Chapter 2, know who John Locke is. Know that the Declaration was primarily authored by Jefferson, the Constitution primarily authored by Madison. Know what the Declaration was. Know what the Articles of Confederation were. And then know the 3 branches of our government today under the Constitution. We will talk about, actually, we've got to finish the other 2 things that they debated at the Constitutional Convention. The first one we just covered was the Great Compromise. We've got 2 more things that we'll cover Friday, and then we'll talk about the Bill of Rights very briefly. So, but don't worry. It'll be a straightforward quiz right out of this text in your notes. No tricks or anything. And I'll make sure you have plenty of time to do it. So we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
What do I need to do about the test since I won't be there Friday?
Okay, so we've got Haven, right?
Yes.
And is it Connor?
Avery.
So you 2 will be gone all day Friday from school?
Yeah, I'm going on an SPCLA trip.
Okay. If I set up a time on Saturday or Sunday where you can take it, would that be a possibility?
Yes.
Sunday after 3, I'll be back home, so I can take it then.
Okay. So would that be all right, Haven? Like Sunday, maybe if I made it available at 7 o'clock at night?
Yeah, that would work.
Okay. So Sunday at 7, I'll send you guys an email to remind you. And I'll also kind of have a rundown of what you need to review or need to know from the textbook. Again, it'll be open book, but there will be a time limit. So, okay. I'll get all those details to you in the email.
Thank you.
Thank you.